Welcome back. We're discussing the rise of Rwanda. Joining us now to discuss the political and economic development of Rwanda since the genocide is Akuetteh, the Executive Director of the African Immigrant Council, and Cedric Mohammed, a macroeconomist and Chief Executive of Africa Pre-Brief, an investment advisory firm. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you for joining us. Cedric, when we talk about Rwanda, we think immediately genocide. But how successful has the country been in emerging from its traumatic past? Economically, it's seen as a big success story. But have the scars of the genocide really healed?
The scars are not completely healed, but by relying on gacaca and some communal and traditional means to resolve grievances and to elevate justice, they have gone a long way in terms of bringing the people back together. There's actually two stories. In one respect, there's the rising tiger of East Africa that Rwanda has become. And then there is the geopolitical and regional, I would say, weight that Rwanda has actually provided in Central Africa. So it's got to balance two different roles, one political in the region and one economic on the East End as the window and gateway to investment in Africa for the rest of the world.
South Africa's Mail and Guardian newspaper reported recently that ethnicity still plays a role in Rwandan life, a big role, and there are still deep divisions. What is your view? Are the two main groups, the Tutsi and the Hutus, is there still a lot of tension between them?
I think there is, but I think it's submerged because, as you know, the president banned identification now, so that officially in Rwanda now we don't have the two ethnic groups, we just have Rwandans. But I worry because this is a dictate by a man who has ruled the country with an iron fist ever since taking over in 1994. Secondly, they have actually changed the genocide. They talk about genocide of the Tutsi. So the only time that they identify one group is when they are talking about the genocide. So I do think there is a lot of boiling tension below the surface. And also, you know, Rwanda's role in the region, I think for me is very troubling because we know they have invaded Congo twice. We know they have funded militias. M23 is an example. So I really don't see their role in the region as that great. I fear that they are creating situations that will cause problems both inside and in the neighborhood.
Cedric, as we heard from our previous guest, General Dallaire, the Canadian Lieutenant General, he said the world had failed Rwanda in 1994. The UN looked on. It was pretty helpless on what it could do. When it comes to Africa, have bodies like the UN, has the world, the big powers, have they changed their view of Africa?
I don't really think so. And if you look at Rwanda, I don't think the failure began in 1994. I think it began in the Berlin Conference in the 1800s, because that is what elevated the Tutsi over the Hutu. And that division and disparity in wealth that it created is really what Rwanda continues to wrestle with. But I will say that there's an opportunity for the newer generation to do better. And I think President Kagame has tried to partner with those who don't have that same mindset. But tradition is tradition, and the wealth as a source of capital through inheritance is something that you cannot resolve in one decade or two.
Right, and there are very controversial views, if I could put it that way,
Sure.
on the President Kagame. On the one hand, you know, he's seen as someone who's violated human rights. On the other hand, he has presided over the growth of the economy of the country.
And women.
And women's rights.
The role
well,
of women, the elevation of women in Rwanda is a model for the rest of the world. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I think his challenge is deciding when to exit. Does he stay on and attempt to go to a third term? Was he the glue that provided a transition similar to President Mandela? Or is he now drunk off of the wine of power himself and think he's the new version of Singapore?
What about the United States? The U.S. is playing a role in a very big children's project in Rwanda right now. Has the U.S. role got bigger? Is it more significant?
Actually, the U.S. dialed back a little bit in 2010 when the last presidential elections was held, and General Kagame claimed a 92% victory. Now, I have to tell you that there are the groups in Washington and around the U.S. that focus on Africa policy and try to push the U.S. government. We have been, I'm part of that network, and we are very unhappy because the U.S. and other global powers have a clear record of backing dictatorial African regimes, and then they implode. I mean, right next to Rwanda, you have the DRC. Mobutu was put in place. He stayed there 37 years. When he left, the place collapsed. So we are actually worried that the story of Rwanda, we think, is actually mislabeled. People look at the economic growth. Some of it comes from plundering the wealth of the Congo. We think the heavy-handed rule by General Kagame is a pattern. We have seen it. We saw it in Chad. Hissène Habré now is being tried for atrocities he committed. He's been tried in Senegal when he was president of Chad. He was put in place by Ronald Reagan and Francois Mitterrand. So I have to tell you, we think that the kind of economic progress that Rwanda has made, even if you accept that they have made it, and there is some question as to how much, it is being done at a great price, and it is not sustainable because there are patterns. As soon as a strong man gets off the scene, whether voluntarily or not, everything that they've put together collapses. So we worry about Rwanda, and we think that the U.S. should actually withdraw and push the president to democratize, because democracy is what will move the country forward. Now, you know, quickly, I brought this. President Kagame just gave a speech in Rwanda celebrating Meles Zenawi, and he talked about how democracy and development are actually linked and have to go hand in hand. I almost fell out of my chair reading it because he's not democratic, if we are going to be true about it. And you know, the question of women, yes, I think women's representation in the Rwandan parliament is a good thing, but we have to understand why. With the genocide and other things, a lot of men have been killed. Secondly, for me, the very troubling thing is in 2010, in the election, the most prominent person that challenged President Kagame is Victoire Ingabire. She was put in jail on Trump charges. She is still in jail for challenging the president. So right. I question how deep that commitment to women's advancement is.
Yes, I think President Kagame can address the issue by putting up the term limits to referendum, because, as the gentleman just said, members of parliament are appointed. Several of the senators, I believe 8, were appointed by him. So that, if he trusts his nation, and if he's been a father of sorts to the country, at some point he has to trust the people with the responsibility of taking over governance. But I want to go back to women again, because in every society in Africa, the head economist is the woman. You have massive savings in the northern region of Rwanda, where the genocide and the fighting was the worst, and you have widows, as was mentioned previously. If President Kagame could take some of the money coming into his country and just distribute it, directly distributed to women who have, I think it's called Ikimini. It's a rotating and savings association. Allow them to build up the society, continue with his plans to follow the Singapore model to build a service economy on tourism and things like that. And then you have a median age of 18 in Rwanda. He has got to address the concerns of youth and young people and bring back those who are in the diaspora. Rwanda has sent, unfortunately, dispersed persons to 21 countries in Africa. And then if he's truly serious about following the Singaporean model, Singapore worked because they brought Malay, Chinese, and Europeans, highly educated persons. He needs to make an appeal to Black America, to Africans in the diaspora, to come and really develop and diversify the economy.
And Nee, the other problem that the country has, I mean, it aspires to become what is known as a middle-income country. I mean, that's an ambitious goal. We have seen significant growth rates of averaging around 8%. Poverty rates have come down. But 90% of the population, according to the Washington Post, still work in the informal agricultural sector. I mean, can it really achieve this goal of becoming an...
You know, frankly, I think that is not sustainable. I really don't think so. I mean, I hate to beat a dead horse, but I do think you have to democratize that. That has benefits beyond the political sphere. I mean, political economy is, you've got a linkage. If you open up the system, for instance, elections in 2 years, 2017, if other parties are allowed to run, other candidates, they can present different alternatives for developing the country. When one man sits on top and puts his finger on everything, and people are afraid. And frankly, I think people in Rwanda are afraid because they've been governed by the same man who came to power through war. We must not forget the RPF, which Mr. Kagame used to be the second in command, and now he's the head. The war in Rwanda started when they invaded from Uganda. Okay, so you've got this military man who has been running the country. Yes, we've got some economic growth, we've got some progress, but again, it is not sustainable. And so the best thing I think you can do is to democratize. He's been in power formally since 1994 when they took over.
Akuetteh, Cedric, Mohammed, thanks to both of you for joining us.